Hello.
Hello. Good morning.
It's very early for you there.
Yeah. Did Brandon tell you I was filling in for him this morning?
Yes, he had.
Thanks for having me.
Um, let's give it like a minute or two and we will start. My screen or my window. Okay. By the way, feel free to leave messages on the chat box if you cannot speak and you have questions or comments. And if you have any comments, also feel free to raise your hand and I'm more than happy to give you talk time. We're actually going to have a discussion towards the end, so be ready for that. Okay, so we are a minute in and 10 more seconds and we will start. It's tough for some people because we have people from the US, we have people from Asia and Australia. In total, the working group of mold has around 17 people. So I see now the number of 8. I don't know if this is accurate because we also have some AI things here. Okay, so I'm gonna start the presentation. So we are going to start with some overview from the survey we conducted, some standards overview according to some countries out there, what they are proposing around mold, literature overview, and a discussion at the end. I promise we will not surpass the 60 minutes. Probably it's going to be shorter. The reason I'm writing mold and mold twice, but in the UK and the US format, is because I think it's very important to try to introduce those two terms in the official document. And the reason is because in some cases when someone tries to find information about mold and he is accustomed to the UK or maybe the US writing, and the information is written the other way around, they are not able to find what they're looking for. And I have experienced that specific problem going through the standards and going through the literature where some of them, they use the American and some of them, they use the European way. So the survey overview taught us that based on your feedback, the assessment logic, the indoor vs outdoor, is commonly used among the experts we have in the group, 8 by 8% actually. And many of you also say that this absolute limit is not working in any way. Background mold levels vary too widely by geography and season to set a single safe number for all buildings. So for that reason, most of you say clearly that we shouldn't even consider it. Then the global standard mission is that experts agree that while the link between dampness and health is clear, the causation for specific spore counts remains elusive. There is no linear dose response, and the same thing is also shared by the literature review that we did. Then we have the problem of individual sensitivity. Some individuals, kids, elderly, or people with specific allergies, this low count, let's say, maybe not even be appropriate to mention. And similar analogies like the peanut allergy, right? Some people are completely fine by it, but some people are extremely sensitive. Then there is a 100% agreement among the experts that infants and the elderly and people with immune compromised health system require distinct protective thresholds. even a safe limit were found for healthy adults, it would be inadequate for high-risk groups. And the group finally said that we could consider some trigger levels over numerical limits. And instead of simple pass and fail number, as a trigger mandates further investigation like leaks, odors, visible growth, prevents the false sense of security by those low count numbers that we may measure, and provide a presence of hidden moisture of toxic species. So there are some standards out there across the globe around mold. Some of them, they have established specific limits for specific taxonomy, but some others they don't even disclose. So based on the STC 34 list, and I have also a Google document there, and I will share this presentation with you guys in case you would like to access it. We have put down all of those limits that we could find for mold. Or in some countries, they will not even talk about the word mold, but they will have them under the word humidity or damp, basically. So the numerical limits that we could find, limits very significant by country, such as 200 or 500 or even 1,000 in Malaysia. Then the comparison of outdoors, Portugal specifically say that regulation states that indoor level should be equal to the outdoor level of the commercial building specifically, but they don't disclose anything else about residential buildings, let's say. Then Belgium uses a scale ranging from very low to very high, depending on the type of building. And then we have Denmark, Norway, that emphasize that the absence of visible mold, damage, mold odor, or low level of fungus spore as the standard definition in their papers. In addition to airborne measurements, some standards indicate for physical sign of mold and moisture. So many guidelines include those, like from the Republika Czech and Canada, Norway, simply state that visible mold growth or extensive dampness is not permitted or should not occur. Surface area limit, Denmark provides specific allowance surface area for mold, such as 0 cubic centimeter in habitable rooms and up to 400 cubic centimeter in wet rooms. Not cubic, sorry, square centimeters in wet rooms. And then finally, the UK guidelines specifics that no visible mold should appear on external wall of property heated dwellings. Then the literature review that we did gave us more or less the same feedback as the expert survey that we conducted. So according to the literature, there is no universal acceptance safe limit. Now, the lack of, again, of the dose response data, scientific consensus is hampered by the dearth of human dose responsible data, making it difficult to determine exactly how much mold exposure leads to specific health outcomes. Variable susceptibility, many responses to mold are highly individualized. For example, what might be safe for one adult may trigger symptoms to someone else. Temporal dynamic mold concentrations in indoors are temporally dynamic and fluctuate based on the building operation, human activity, patterns of occupancy, making a single safe measurement unrepresentative, basically. And traditional measurements methods such as counting and cultivating airborne fungi are considered unreliable for predicting health risks because they often underestimate the total exposure and do not account for non-culturable or dead spore that still trigger reactions. Furthermore, while general safe limits do not exist, some papers mention a clinical threshold, which are the minimum airborne concentration required to trigger symptoms in already sensitized populations. These values vary significantly by country and fungal genus. We have 3 here, and the numbers are totally different between those 3 species. I don't know if you have any thoughts on them. I think it's very difficult to determine what kind of fungi do you have in a building in order to say to the general public that those counts should be below those numbers again. And researchers conclude that rather than relying on these debatable number thresholds, the most effective public health strategy is to rapid identification and correction of water sources and the removal of damp and moldy materials to protect building occupants. A little bit furthermore, there is a sufficient evidence of causal relationship between indoor mold exposure for both the development and exacerbation of asthma in children. Children are generally more sensitive to this condition than adults. Many papers share the same conclusion. In adults, exposure to moldy environment is associated with the incidence and worsening of occupational asthma. However, evidence regarding asthma development in the general adult population remains more limited. Now, beyond asthma, indoor dampness and mold are considered associated with allergic rhinitis, something that I suffer, cough with dyspnea, respiratory infection, bronchitis, and eczema. The social and economic burden is significant, with billions of dollars annual contribute to asthma morbidity and allergic rhinitis linked with dampness and mold in the United States alone. And finally, the traditional measurement methods such as air sampling and counting are not reliable. Many papers, they talked about the DNA-based research, which indicates that moldy home poses significant fungal ecology characterized by low community illness, but higher relative abundance of specific taxonomy like Aspergillus and Penicillium, which differ significantly from the ecology of the dry home. Something else that we find lately, actually, is something which is called microbial volatile organic compound, or MVOC, which, according to some latest research, it may be better as it gives stronger prediction for respiratory illness. I don't know what are your opinions about that specific indicator and how we can implement it possibly. So basically, there was an agreement between the working group recommendations and the scientific literature, which is good. Here is a summary of everything we asked and everything we found from the literature according to the sampling, performance, remediation and strategies, vulnerable population, if there is a dose-response relationship, the healthy links and causation, the assessment methodology, and universal safe limits in general, which are not possible. So now I would like to ask you guys whether you have a specific topic that you would like to discuss, or we can go through and discuss those specific questions that I have here prepared. So if you have any questions, please raise your hands. Otherwise, I'm going to start with the questions. Leo, please.
Hi, my name is Leo. I'm from Envida Environmental. So we specialize in mold remediation, and we've been doing it for 16 years throughout the world, really, primarily focusing within the Middle East. One point that obviously we deal with a lot of sort of B2C clients when they have mold within a property. And the trigger point is always an interesting point. I've found that within 16 years of doing remediation and root cause investigations, that indicating the genus has only come in helpful once in thousands of projects. Where you came in and you were talking about the MVRCs, I think it's much better predictor of sensitive of contamination within the air than actually spending the best part of like what $300, $400 to find out the genus. You know, is it Aspergillus? Is it this? Is it Cladosporium? So I think that's definitely a great point that you said towards the end, as well as many other good points. It's not just that one. So yeah, I think the definition, it's not that helpful a lot of the time, and I think because of what happened in the US in the 90s, especially with Aspergillus, when it was like a really sensitive case that was going on, you know, toxic black mold and Aspergillus, and you'll die if you see anything black on the walls. That's really, it's still around, and that sensitivity to having a particular genus creates a lot of unwarranted emotion because of that. So I think sticking with MVRC is quite a neutral element to actually, as part of our data collection and part of our remediation. And I'll stop there because I've talked too long.
No, awesome, thank you. I don't know, Patrick.
Hi, thanks. My name is Patrick McGrevand. I'm an environmental scientist with Alator Data Services. We primarily deal with mold remediation and social housing in the UK. I probably put my hand a bit too late, kind of just echoing Leo's point on the genus being less useful. I'd like to hear more about the MVOC metric. As one thing I've kind of always said is that identifying the genus is a short-term, I suppose, remediation or setting yourself at ease, because if conditions to allow a certain genus are present, it's likely that condition is viable for another genus to form. So it's if anything, a short-term kicking the can down the road response. I'm really interested in this MVOC approach to understanding the full approach, and specifically in terms of how you can potentially monitor that in real time. Just if that's something we're able to discuss, I'm really interested in that.
Mm-hmm. Monitoring wise, I think there is some development in that specific area currently by by some companies out there. They're trying to make monitoring of mold, or the byproducts of molds, if you like, more easy, more accessible, and more in a continuous manner. I think we need a little bit more time, to be honest with you, in order for those kind of products to be ready. But there are some progresses, and that's very encouraging in general. Okay, I'm going to start with the first question, which is react to visible indication. Something else before I begin with that is something that I didn't encounter throughout the literature review, or maybe throughout the survey because I didn't ask about it, is about the importance of the building material. What kind of building material do we use in modern buildings, and how those materials can help or not the growth of mold, right? And then about the relationship of the envelope between the outdoors and indoors, and how managing and having a complete vision of what's happening outside versus indoors can help us have a better protection from possibly mold growth. Specifically, I'm talking about the fact that in many cases, maybe indoors the environment is dry, but outdoors it is quite wet. So we are now pulling the humid or the water particles from the outside environment indoors through the building materials, where the mold can grow and create all the problems, where now it is not visible in many cases because it is growing, behind the drywall or whatever material they are using. And another example, for example, I would like to share is my home. Here in Spain, I have two places. One is by the coast, and although the humidity there is quite high, the outdoor humidity and the indoor humidity, there is some kind of a balance. So, and the material also of the building are made of stone, and they don't allow mold to grow, even though humidity surpasses 60% most of the year. Like I will tell you, in summer, it will be around 80. It's like being in a tropical place, especially in August. And in winter, it's between around 60%, 60, 75%. But again, I think the material is, and the relationship between the indoor and outdoor environment is that's keeping the building safe from the growth of mold in that specific area. But anyways, so I will begin with the first question, which is reactive visible indicators. So any sign of visible water damage, damp material, visible mold or mold odor should be considered unhealthy, an indicator of increased health risk. Do you agree with that? Should we incorporate in the recommendations we are going to give through the paper or Go AQS? You can also use the emojis here for reactions if you don't like speaking. Patrick, okay. Fantastic. So possibly all of you agree. If you don't, Leo, please. Your microphone.
Sorry, but if tell me to shut up if you ever want. But I think sometimes where you have to. So when we're doing remediation, we always follow like the gold standard, which is IICRC S520.
Mm-hmm.
So this helps us to understand why mold's growing, root cause analysis, looking at sort of your question that's going to come on of like porosity of materials, water activity within materials, all that kind of stuff, right? But I think that when it comes to mold, because it's such an integral part of our environment, and it can be, it can be green walls throughout a property, or it could be a little bit of green in your bathroom, for example. So I think that you have to take a measured approach, and I feel like the standard does that. Definitely, whenever visible mold is there, it's always a concern.
Mm-hmm.
But I think whenever we write specifications and standards, we like, I guess my point before, we have to take some kind of context into it as well when we write in these kind of overarching statements.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last?
Oh yeah, so we always have to try and draw as much context to sort of an overall statement of.
Oh yeah.
Of like a visible mold is always a concern.
Yeah.
Because it is definitely, and it's always an indication of moisture and that your building systems aren't working together. So it is healthy from that point of view. So it's an indicator. Mm-hmm. But I guess people, as you talked about, people have a different relationship with mold throughout the globe. You can go to Asia and mold's an integral part of their life. You could go to New York and they'll shut the building down till complete remediation's done. You can go to Britain where we don't care about it. It's only in the last 5-6 years that they started to ramp up on it. So yeah, everyone's got a bit of a relationship. So I guess you've got to build as much context as that to sort of overarching questions that come up. I guess that's my only real point.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Then is fix the source. So the primary recommendation is to identify and correct the water source, whether this is a plumbing issue or a roof leak that may allow the growth of microbial. Do you agree with this statement? You can also suggest how we can improve that statement or recommendation. Please, Patrick.
Just one thing on that. I like the idea of it as in going to the source of it. One thing we've kind of noticed working with a lot of social housing organizations is that the source is often not a source of moisture. The source is effectively normal occupancy, but the issue is that there's a buildup due to a lack of ventilation or poor building performance, not necessarily water ingress, but a lack of water removal. I think maybe just rephrasing it to understand that even if someone's not essentially misusing their property and there's not a structural issue, the lack of kind of standard performance in terms of air change rates or in terms of heating performance in terms of cold surfaces can also, so it's not really an amount of moisture issue, it's a collection issue. Maybe just rephrasing it that way might help kind of people understand that someone in a property could not necessarily be doing something wrong, and the property might not necessarily be majorly misbehaving in terms of performance, but it might just be a coalescence of a few small issues allowing collection rather than build up due to ingress, if that makes sense. That'll be kind of one small note on that.
Absolutely, thank you for your input. Then we have remediation. Occupants should ensure the rapid drying or removal of damp material and the cleaning or removal of moldy material as quickly as safely as possible. Do you agree? Leo, again, please.
Sorry, it was just to add something that Patrick said, where you sort of open it up that it's not just occupants, but it's also landlords as well. Because I think there's a culture here at the moment where occupants, not that they can't be blamed, but there's like a lack of education. There's a lot of things that are happening politically where you can't actually say, yeah, it is the occupant that's done it, or it is the landlord that's done it, or it is the owner that's done it. So narrowing, and I know you're talking about building owners in the next question, but bringing it up to not just occupants, but occupants and landlords, or occupants and building managers, where actually, as Patrick rightly said, it's always about ventilation, well, not always, but a lot of the time it is about ventilation and air exchange. It's about getting, especially in the properties that we have, where it's natural ventilation that comes through. We rely on getting that air exchange through. So education's a really, really big part of it. And like I said, politically here, they want to focus on landlords and owners, but occupants also have a big role to play in there as well. So yeah, just maybe opening it up a little bit more. I'm not going to answer the next question. I'm going to shut up.
No, absolutely. I mean, the most common mistake someone is going to do indoors is drying clothes, right? And that's gonna increase the humidity in the indoor environment tremendously. And it's not the fault of the owner, but it's the fault of the occupant of the building. So you're absolutely right. We have to open the statement a little bit there and include everybody. Then the next question that I'm asking is about removing, those kind of moldy materials and fixing the problem as fast as possible. I assume you all agree on that. There is no reason keeping mold in house or houses. Okay. Then preventive maintenance. Building owners and homeowners should implement improved maintaining programs and moisture control practices during design and construction to prevent future accumulation. Is relative humidity above 60% a good indicator of possible damp or mold issues? Patrick?
Just on this one, it kind of touches on two things. One thing we're seeing a lot of is housing associations coming around with the idea of kind of archetype analysis. So identifying where inside their larger housing fleet they're seeing problems. So we're starting to see a kind of a shift towards a proactive nature. But that often comes to, they look at a proactive kind of approach, they see a property, they go, well, the humidity is below a certain percentage, and so they deem it to be low risk. One thing we're looking at using rather than a kind of a relative humidity is a kind of a moisture mass in milligrams per meter or grams per meter cubed. So it's a potential for condensation in certain areas, and that kind of came out of the issue of often these kind of wall-mounted IoT sensors record air humidity and air temperature when you kind of really want to be looking at surface temperature, surface humidity. So although I would agree here, relative humidity is a good indicator, I think people treat it as a baseline risk rather than an initial indicator to kind of look at larger trends. So I think it's a good first step, but I think the only thing I would say is make it clear to people that that is still a first step as an indicator rather than a conclusive analysis.
Something else that I found mostly from the US is that they use the dew point, something which we do not use so often here in Europe for some reason. I think because of how it is translated. I think Fahrenheit translates better into the dew point than Celsius. My perspective. I don't know if I'm right. Leo?
You stole exactly what I was going to say.
Okay.
This dew point. So for us, like you were talking about with the binary pass or fail when you have forced air or passive air mold tests, people get very comfortable with humidity, and they think, oh, do you know what? Because I think the most like thermophilic mold grows at 62% relative humidity, or there's enough moisture within the area for that. So people think, yeah, you know, well, if it's 40 to 50, it's okay. If it's 50 to 55, we're in 55 to 60, we're in that sort of red area. Once it goes into 60, we have like we're in that red area where it's like we're going to get mold. And it's not as simple as that. People get very comfortable with, we're at 50% relative humidity, we're okay. But it's always about dew point. And the translation of dew point is quite difficult for your layman to understand and to get that right. You have to sit them down and coach them through it, really. So I think dew point is one of the, and like Patrick said, moisture mass in kilo per cubic meter. That's sort of the pinnacle of where you want to get to. But when we've done reports of people and you show sort of the heat map of relative humidity of dew point and see how a building performs over time or a space performs over time, it's very, very good for them. I'll show you.
Perfect. Kendra?
Yeah, Kendra, I'm from the US. I was just going to add the comment about dew point as well being a bigger issue here. We have a wide variety of climates. Our building practices and construction materials differ a lot from you guys. And so hitting that dew point is, I think, an indicator I'd like to see even in the US us move more towards. But again, to Leo's point and your point, I think it's a difficult concept for a lot of people to wrap their head around. But I'm just thinking like some of our northern climates, like hitting, especially like in the winter, they start having issues with what is, below 60%, creating issues indoors. And so just something to think about. Nothing much more to add other than I was just going to flag the dew point before you.
Patrick.
Sorry, I just have a question for you, Kendra. Just you mentioned there kind of dew point. I just want to ask how you guys going to use that. Is it more you look at a minimal dew point separation must be required, or is it there's a certain dew point you must not exceed? Is it like a threshold or a differential?
Yeah, great question. So it's not even something any of our government agencies are addressing. Like we're still using the 30 to 50%, I think is the EPA, and maybe the CDC is 40 to 60%. It is a bigger conversation among building scientists who are trying to drive some of these changes in the way we build and maintain buildings. And so even though it's creeping up more and more in the conversation, there's not a lot of consensus, I think, in part because there's not a lot of understanding about how it all works together. And then the variability, right, in any home and climate, it's just, I think there's so many variables that we still can't even wrap our head around. So when dew point comes into the conversation, it's typically on a case-by-case basis in my experience. And it tends to be, the lucky few who happen to find someone who's trained in building science who even is thinking about those things.
Yeah, one thing we're trying to kind of get across to some people is that it's a dew point differential, almost normalized, I guess you'd say, to outdoor temperature. Is something we're trying to work with, but it's a real difficult struggle to get people to kind of work with that as a metric. To be honest, we've not had much success with it just yet. It's more me explaining this is the problem properly because we can see it, and then people go, okay, well, I'll just come back to you rather than looking at that metric next time.
And we do a lot of stupid
stuff,
right? Like we're putting in the US like HVAC systems in our hot, humid attics, and then we have cold metal ducts that, it's an issue, but we're not connecting the dots, unfortunately. So
it's at least reassuring to hear we're not the only people with that problem. So
we're making a lot of mistakes here that, are costly. Is what it is. We're working on it.
Leo?
Yeah, it's just to add that we use the 30 to 50% differential between the two. So when we calculate in, that's really what we do. And then for results for clients, we plot it against the psychrometric chart. So at least that way, it's a bit of a visual that they can see the different elements, and we try and work that chart so that they can actually see where the plot points are. So it's just a way of making the invisible visual to a client, that they can see how their building's performing. And I think that it's a bit going off tangent, but I think the IoT parts have really helped with this, where you try and get like a cumulative score of a particular property. You know, you're a 10 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10, or in our case a 2 out of 10. You know, where they can actually visualize their data properly, because once they start to visualize data, whether it be dew point, humidity, temperature, if they can start visualizing it, then it's something that they want to improve. And then it becomes a CSR part, where it's like, okay, from a CSR part, how are we doing, what's going on? And then it just becomes like a continuous improvement aspect then.
I love that statement, Leo. You inspired me right now, and I'm gonna include that in the recommendations actually. By the way,
if it goes on.
By the way, the reason when I've started with Go AQS, I didn't call it Go EQS was because of the humidity parameter. There is no consensus out there about what's this, let's say, the recommended value, and I knew that I will have problems later on if I start recommending specific values for temperature, humidity across the globe, because of the variability Kendra mentioned, and also the fact that you may be accustomed of temperature, humidity in one place, and when you move to a different place, now you are feeling totally uncomfortable. That was my experience, for example, living in the US. My body was accustomed to certain temperatures and humidity levels, and in Massachusetts, the situation was totally different. So if I had to comply with a standard that told me that the temperature should be 19 Celsius, I would be cold all day. But for people there, it was the norm. Like they really like 90 Celsius, and everything above it was really hot for them. But anyways, and the last sentence is prioritize sensitive groups. So remediation efforts should be prioritized in environments where high-risk individuals, particularly infants and children, live. Do you agree? I think yes. And I will also say that in those cases, I think that it makes sense to say that those individuals should find another place temporarily to live while all of those remediation efforts are taking place in their residential building or whatever place they are staying. Something final that I found through the research was that moisture and high humidity can alter the chemistry of dull materials, leading to increase of non-biological emissions like formaldehyde and some other VOCs from the degradation of plasticizers, even in the vinyl flooring, which are also linked to respiratory issues. So when we have high humidity, we also may have problems from other pollutants that they arise in the indoor space. And that's all. I don't know if you have any additional questions, thoughts. Leo, please.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, on that material, on that last sentence that you put there, it's the VOC element of it. So once because it's volatile organic compounds are used in especially things like furniture, and glues and in woods. So when you increase temperature or increase the moisture, it releases the VOCs out of it because they're volatile. So it will off gas, and we've got a project at the moment in Morocco where actually the moisture is driving the VOCs out. So we have, it's not just a mold issue, it's also a VOC issue as well, because it drives it through. Obviously the hotter the area, or warmer the space, sorry, the more it will evaporate these materials out as well. So yeah, but I think it's a good point to put there, because you know, any time that you do have mold, it is a failure of different building systems that are all working together. So that failure isn't just mold, it's also poor air quality, it's also lack of ventilation, which again is air quality. But you know, it doesn't just happen in isolation, it also creates other issues that got it. So it's a good point to put at the end.
Thank you. Patrick?
So just a question for you there, Leo. I suppose to the group as well. You kind of touched on something there. Have you looked at, or have you kind of any experience looking at kind of correlation between kind of high hot humid environments where kind of a mold growth index calculation might also be correlating with formaldehyde, and using that as a precursor for conditions for growth? Because we've recently found that a lot of people are looking at formaldehyde in kind of social housing because they don't really know why. And I've kind of crossed some kind of relatively low cost sensors that can do formaldehyde at a reasonably accurate level. So it's something I'm looking at. Just wondering if that's something you've looked at.
Sorbent tubes are the way that we do it. You can, if you're looking to get formaldehyde specifically, I mean, you can get TVRCs, obviously. But if you want specific formaldehyde level, it's through sorbent tubes. That's the way that we got it. Where when we were doing that testing for that in the UAE, it was impossible to get them at the time. And in a specific test case, we were working in a school in the UAE where there was mold growth that we found, or they found and reported it back, and they wanted to know why. But as we were testing, we found very high levels of VOCs, so we didn't specifically look at formaldehyde, and that was because what they were doing, they were turning, because it's the UAE and because it was the summertime, and because cooling's expensive, they were turning off the air conditioning at night. So the last person at the school finished at, I don't know, 6-7 o'clock PM. They'd turn on they'd turn off the fresh air unit, they'd turn on the fresh air in the morning, and then what would happen is you still got ambient temperatures of externally at 35 degrees at night time, but you have but the difference between the dew point, you've got a lot of condensation that happens. So a mold was forming, but because it was warmer, VOC was being driven and off gassing. So in relation to your question, that was the first thing that I thought of, like a project where a mold project caused VOC growth, VOC increase, and also mold is a VOC as well. So, but in particular, formaldehyde, that was one where we found.
Just wanting to look at them, maybe like I said, there's a couple of IoT sensors now doing a reasonably accurate formaldehyde. If you want continuous for that, just safety sending someone to a school at night to collect sorbent tubes might be of interest.
I mean, it was like 10 years ago that I did it. I know that the technology's moved on now. But yeah, that was just an issue that we had at that time.
So what do you guys think about this new technology that is developing in order to measure those microbial volatile organic compounds? Have you heard about it? Have you any Kendra?
I think the only thing that came to mind here is I spend a lot of my time working with sensitized clients or people with mold-related illness or other underlying health conditions. And a lot of the IEPs I work with, the vast majority of the time, it's not currently damp places that are posing problems. And so we find a lot of the dormant mold, or where the water source has been maybe corrected, right? Maybe it was a leaky toilet and they stopped the toilet but didn't bother to explore the subfloor or what was below. And so in that case, would NVOCs be the best indicator? No, because they're not being produced. And so it was just a thought that I had. I think it could be a great indicator, but with that caveat that it may not always be something that's measurable, even though a building has growth.
Leo? Your microphone.
Sorry, to add to that, Kendra. Like you said, just the sensitivity around mold, it's so subjective to the person that, you know, from if you were looking at it just as a question, like a general question, if I was a building manager and I'd spent hundreds of thousands of pounds remediating my building, and I want to make sure that it's actually okay, you can have baseline parameters that says, okay, your building it has this number in the summer, this number in the winter, this spring, summer, and that becomes your baseline. Now, if I wanted to monitor that against warranties, guarantees, all of that kind of thing in the future, I'd be like, yeah, MVRC is monitoring brilliant. That way I can see what's happening at these different parameters. But I would say to the end user that has to sort of live in that environment, it might muddy the water way, and it could provide, yeah, it could create more issues than it solves. So I guess that data is valuable. The data is valuable, but I guess it depends on who holds it.
Kendra? No, Sayada.
Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm indoor air quality assessor from Malaysia. So we usually help to measure TVOC and also total fungal count in Malaysia as per regulations. So actually, I don't see any correlations about like high TVOC have high total fungal count or also fungal growth in the surface. So maybe it needs a lot of fungus in the surface or in the air to link with the VOCs. So far, we measure more than 200 buildings. We do the air quality assessments. We don't find the correlations about high TVOC with high total fungal counts or high surface fungal count. Yeah.
Thank you for your input. But in general, with TVOC sensors, the problem is we do not know what we are measuring, which specific volatile compounds are taken into consideration from the sensor. And those microbial volatile organic compounds are totally different from aldehyde, let's say, as a baseline. So maybe this is a problem because why you don't see this correlation. I will estimate, but anyways. Okay, so perfect. One last question from my side is anybody of you gonna be in indoor air in Singapore this June? No?
Maybe
Okay, then.
might go.
Okay, perfect then.
My
Rolf?
colleague is going to be there as well.
Oh,
Yeah,
perfect.
I'm Roelke. I work for the National Scientific Institute for Public Health in Belgium. So our scope is a little bit different than yours, I think. We mostly do research projects. So for us, for example, it is interesting to have like the genus of the spores that we find in the air. But my colleagues will be presenting in Singapore in May, I think, June, sorry.
June.
Yeah, it will be Berdike that was also be going to participate in the meeting, but had to cancel last minute. So that's why I'm here. But maybe you can meet each other there then.
Perfect. And let me ask you something else. So do you do also epidemiological studies based on the data that you're collecting from the different species?
Sorry, I didn't understand.
So do you also do epidemiological studies around the species that you are analyzing?
Yes, sometimes we do an epidemiological study because we've been measuring mostly in Brussels, in dwellings in Brussels, that we're looking for fungal contamination that is related to health problems in the inhabitants. It's usually on doctors' request that we perform these measurements. And from time to time, we try to do an epidemiological study with our results. I think the categories that you mentioned in your slides from Belgium are also based on our results. I just have to say that these categories are really specific for dwellings in Brussels. We also do measurements in other environments, but we don't use these categories because every environment is specific. For example, we also do hospital samplings. We cannot use these categories in this setting because you have more patients that are more at risk than a normal person. So yeah, these categories are to be taken with a lot of context. I would like to add, yes.
Thank you. All right, then, thank you once more. We did it in 50 minutes, fantastic. So we have extra 10 minutes to do something else. Thank you all. Again, this meeting is recorded, so we will also share publicly the video. And we are also going to now write a document, which we're gonna share with you in order for you to approve or not, and suggest changes as it's gonna go directly to the white paper. Thank you again, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye. Thank you.
And that's all.